good afternoon, everyone. Fabulous to have you all here. Really exciting for me to have so many people register for the webinar this afternoon. I'm doing that thing right now, being able to kind of look across and seeing you entering the room. So welcome. Fabulous to have you all coming along and being a part of the journey, with us today. This path that we're looking to walk towards a restorative future. I make a couple of assumptions as we enter this informative webinar, and it is intended today to be an information webinar. Some of you may have, for instance, come across and seen me in a keynote presentation or in some of the media work that I do and think you're going to get sort of the bells and whistles today and all the excitement and the stories. It's probably a level below that. I know that you're here today trying to make a really sober and a really important decision for your school. So I want to make sure that I lean into being of as best service as I possibly can for you by being really clear about the fact that I think being as informative as I can today is a good thing to do. And so the assumption that I make is that in your school, you've given some thought to this restorative future as being a potential destination for your school. And well done. I know that myself as a school leader, it was something that I made the decision that a restorative future for my school would be a really positive future and could achieve some really fantastic things. Some of the possible assumptions that you might be making are that the path to that you've seen taken previously is a bit flawed and not quite the path you want to walk. And perhaps it's a path that your school or in your working history previously, or perhaps even in the stories you've heard out there in school land, you've heard about schools that have decided to walk this path to a restorative future and not found themselves at that restorative future. And so I want to acknowledge that could be you. It could be that you're kind of already made the decision. This restorative future is where your school's headed, and you're trying to work out whether walking that in our company with us side by side with you is a good idea. It could be that I know that from having a look at the registration list that we've got some people today coming along who've kind of already met with us and are looking to frank or to reinforce their knowledge and their understanding of what it would look like to walk with us over the next 3 years in partnership to walk that path. And I guess I should also do the little piece here that there could be some people who've registered in error today. We get some people who are so enthusiastic, almost at the point of zealotry around working restoratively, that at the moment they see, webinar, they register. And if you're in an existing partner school today, I just want to give you the next 56 minutes or so back. You don't need to be here today if you're already one of the 308 schools around Australia that are walking this path towards a restorative future with us, because you've already taken some of the really important steps required, including having made that decision to step forward with us. I think that once we get to the point that we've got people who in the room today who think that the restorative future for their school is a preferred one, it's probably important for me to just spend just a little moment, if that's okay, explaining to you why I think that's a really fabulous decision. And the reason that I think that, and to do that, I think what we can do is entertain an almost decades-old argument that's been happening in Australian schools, in fact, in a number of different countries, in a lot of different Western schools, around the focus that we take around student learning versus student wellbeing. And I know that there are some kind of sub-focuses that sit around that. So on the student learning piece, whether it's your a whole language versus a synthetic phonics kind of approach school, or whether it's on the wellbeing piece, you're looking at variations of a number of different programs and hoping that one of them will kind of do its thing for you. I think that there's been probably about 30 years now of Australian school leaders thinking to themselves, gee, which pedal do I push? And I think that's really unfortunate that Australian school leaders feel that there's some kind of choice to be made here, that there's some kind of sacrifice, that this is a zero-sum game, that if I press the wellbeing pedal 70%, then I'm going to have to only provide 30% to the student learning pedal. And I think that there's a better way. I think that we can actually reject that whole premise that this is a zero-sum game. And I think that we can give you the opportunity to push both and to push them really hard. And what I wanted to do today was to kind of lead you into thinking about that a little differently. And this is leveraging some research that's come out of the United States recently. And I know there's some trepidation at the moment, isn't there, about looking over the fence at the United States and taking example from what's going on over there, but there's still some pretty cool stuff happening and some pretty incredible people. In fact, there are some school districts in a place in America called Connecticut that you would have heard of that have been studied by the University of Virginia. And they've been using an approach called Ruler, which is an approach to social and emotional learning. It's clever in that it's all about building the capacity of the young people to navigate school life more successfully, both from a learning and from a socialisation perspective. And there are some unique features about it that stand out in terms of some differentiating factors against what has been our traditional approach to try and improve conduct, engagement, learning, and well-being in our schools. Some of those factors are, let's just walk through them really slowly first. What they're finding is that the approach that they've taken is they said that the first thing they need to do is to focus on the social and emotional competencies, not of the kids, but of the adults. So what they're discovering is that we as adults land in the job of trying to grow young people socially and academically with very little information, very little knowledge, very little agreed scientific background around the way that young people are built and the way that they can be grown successfully. And so they've taken the view that instead of trying to fix the problem of the young people conducting or learning at rates that we would rather they didn't, they've said, first of all, we invest in the social and emotional competencies of the grown-ups, incredibly important. The second thing that they did to differentiate the way they worked in Ruler compared to other programs that have been kind of either forced upon sometimes or selected by schools is that they talk about modelling more than teaching. And so what they're experiencing is that the phenomena of relying on knowledge transfer, for instance, just tell the kids about respect out of context in a classroom, might result in them behaving more respectfully in the yard or when they're unsupervised, that concept is flawed. And that what we need around young people who are really clear on how they are explicitly modelling certain behaviours for young people more than just teaching them. The third thing they do is they prioritise a couple of key factors. They prioritise, first of all, integration, which means what they're looking to do is to integrate this work within every single component of the school's day. And so it means it's not isolated work. We don't teach young people in terms of mini lessons or through projects or through theme days. What they do is embed the work. They embed the language, they embed the practices around conduct and conflict resolution. They think a little about their proactive pedagogies and they say, how can we take that to scale and habit in context? Which means that one of the really important entry points is not that there's a program or even a real schools partnership. That is sort of cookie cutter, off the shelf, ready made for your school, that respect needs to be paid to the intentions around integration, sure, around habit and scale, sure, but mostly around context, which means that we need to think a little bit further and a little more deeply about your school, more than just whether what's being proposed to you is a really good idea. And the fourth clear bias in the Ruler approach has been the deployment for teachers of low investment strategies that have the potential for high return, which kind of sounds like a no-brainer until we stop and ask ourselves, gee, over the last 20 or 30 years, have we done the opposite? Have we asked teachers and schools and school leaders to implement enormous frameworks to build and to implement amazing programs that have been developed off in a think tank or a department of a department? And have we asked them to look out their windows and report on the impact of that? Are they seeing the stakeholders in their school, students, staff, and parents, conduct themselves much differently for all of that effort? And my strong contention to you is that we have asked schools to implement high investment but low return approaches to this enormous task at hand, and that it's time to flip it. That low investment, high return activities that can be taken to scale and have it in the school, that respect the context of your school and what you're trying to achieve, is what we should be doing instead. So what did the University of Virginia discover when they looked across all the districts of schools in Connecticut and in other places across America? What did they discover was the impact of that work Well, there were two clear positives in terms of the social and development growth. So some increases in certain markers, and those markers were around engagement and focus, and also around their social skills, but also the development of leadership skills in young people. Happy days. That's what we're looking for. There were also some reductions. So two key reduction areas were reductions, first of all, in anxiety and depression in young people. I am imagining that the complexity of your school is one of the background reasons for you coming along today. How can we do something about these upwardly spiraling rates of anxiety and depression in young people in a meaningful and sustainable way that doesn't break the resource bank of the school? And then secondly, they found plummeting rates of bullying and aggression. Now that all sounds fabulous, doesn't it? On the kind of the social, the well-being side of it. What about the learning side of it? They found spikes in these districts of schools that are in academic and in student learning outcomes that they had not been able to achieve in the history of their data collection around student learning outcomes. The lesson, we no longer need to walk the path of determining whether we're going to focus on well-being or whether we're going to focus on student learning. In fact, the evidence is undoubted now that the more you focus on both, the more you get both. And what we can do is develop an easier path towards that future for you by bringing those low investment, high return strategies to scale and habit in your school in a way that buys your teachers more effect and a lower stress level. And that's what today's all about, is how can we develop a path? And what we've been doing over the last 6 months or so is developing some paths that mean that we think that we have landed ourselves at a point where we have a partnership option for every single Australian school. We needed to stop and think a little bit about context, because there are some context factors such as budget and the capability to deliver professional learning that schools are finding it really hard to juggle at the moment. And with that in mind, what we've done is develop 4 different levels, 4 different tiers of partnership that we're incredibly excited that we have so many schools at the moment who are picking up that option, and we wanted to put that in front of you today. And our assumption is that you wouldn't mind finding out about those. So we're going to give you this information today, but we're also going to give you the opportunity to tell us about the context piece, because without that, we think that we're going to walk in the wrong direction. So I'm just going to lean forward here and do my thing of changing to the next slide. And that's a neat reminder that you're not watching a video today. So please know that if you like, I can look across here and I can see that, Andrew's here, and I can see that, Emma's here, I can see Jodie's here and Judith's here. And, so for a start, if you are thinking that you'd like to make comment today, I'm keeping my eye on the bottom right corner of my screen, which is where the webinar chat is. And if you'd like to give me some information, give me some feedback as we're going, or ask any questions, please know I'm going to do my best to keep an eye on that and do what I can. Before I do go any further, I do just want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that you are meeting on today. The photo you can see on the screen here is me in my very first year of teaching. This is 1994 in a place called Ali Karung. It's about 400 kilometres north of Alice Springs on, it's easy to kind of say Warlpiri country, which is kind of traditionally what it's called, but it's actually, there are 4 clans, 4 tribes that inhabit that area. There's the Warlpiri group, there's the Wurrungu group, there's the Kadies group, and the Ayawara group. And I learned so much in that first year of teaching, and have continued across my career to learn the amazing ancient wisdom of the First Nations people of Australia. And I just want you to know that what you're going to learn a little bit about today stands on the shoulders of those incredible people. I'm joining you today from Bunurong country. So I'm in a town called Mornington on the Mornington Peninsula, which is just south of Melbourne. I live a little further south again. I'm sort of looking in the direction of my home for some reason, like that's going to help you. In a place called Dramana. Both locations are on Bunurong country. And if you would join me in just thinking for a second and paying that respect to the elders that have walked this country and delivered that ancient wisdom in the past, those that are doing it now, they're doing it tough, and it's an important job. Indeed, is it to give a little thought to those who are going to have to do that in the future as well. We've got a huge responsibility to sustain that critically important culture in our country, and I think it's worthy to recognise it in a non-tokenistic way, but also in a way that recognises the contribution they've made to the model and to the method that you're going to learn a little of today as we move forward. So when we work in partnership with schools, and it's worth declaring that our intention today is to invite you into a conversation about working with us for the next 3 years. We see ourselves as kind of stepping in and being it's like an extension of your leadership team. So we in no way are a program. We in no way are service providers. What we are is authentic around the partnership piece. And so what I want to describe to you today is kind of what our side of the handshake looks like. I'll also give you a little insight into what your side of the handshake needs to look like. But as I mentioned, we've been working on this one singular partnership model now for about 10 or 12 years. And we did some survey work and also some interview work and just some conversational meeting work with our partner schools over the last couple of years. And we've asked them to identify what are the key challenges that we're helping you meet. Because sometimes we can enter the conversation with these are the challenges we want to meet, but context first before content. And so what we've been doing is saying that we want to ask you what challenges are being met in your school through partnership. And they're telling us that that these challenges are presenting in 3 key areas. So 4 key areas for 4 key groups. In terms of students, they're telling us that they're getting drastically improved student behaviour. Now, one of the examples of that is one of our schools in Tasmania who have been working with us for just over 12 months now and have reported a 54% reduction in their student suspensions. And that is not by reducing the threshold for suspension. It's by changing the way that they suspend and indeed changing the way that they re-enter from suspension in such a way that recidivism has dropped away remarkably. But there's also a school that in the space provided by these kids actually being at school, their student learning outcomes have come up. And that's also been increased because the capability of the teachers is manifesting as at a high level of student engagement in the classroom in measurable ways. From a teacher point of view, they're telling us that the burnout thing is reducing, which is great. They're telling us that we've got some really fabulous data that from a number of our schools that were studied in New South Wales last year, that the retention of their staff is incredibly important, keeping good teachers in a time when we've got a teacher shortage crisis. But they're retaining their best teachers at a rate that are outperforming the non-partner schools in Australia. And also that this piece that teachers need to be consistent. And we believe in that the consistency of teacher practice is incredibly important. And what we're finding is that teachers, even if they're well-intended in a lot of schools, are bringing different practice sets and different practice tactics to their classroom that might be useful and good for them, but are hard for others to replicate. And so what we're able to leverage in partnership is bringing everyone kind of collectively onto the same page by writing it. That we are clear about the language, the conduct, and the mindsets that we're working on together in the classroom. From a community perspective, they're telling us that they're getting less adversarial parents and less parent complaints, which we think is great. We'd love to. The metaphor we often use is that we're trying to position parents as sails rather than anchors on this journey. That the school's reputation is being enhanced. In fact, that's been reflected in some really terrific data that's starting to come through from schools who are telling us that their enrolments are increasing, and that this is becoming almost a selling point for their school, being able to say that we're a strong restorative school where people feel safe and that that's been backed up in the community narrative. Indeed, we work in partnership with schools to develop a really great communications plan with the community that elevates the perceived expertise of the teachers, because that's taken a bit of a beating over the last 2 or 3 decades as well in Australia. And that the big bad B word are not just the reality of bullying, not just the statistics of actual bullying, but the challenge that a lot of schools are facing around bullying perceptions pervading, where everything is being labelled as bullying, and we're really struggling to kind of stop parents and young people saying he's bullying me. That parents and students are actually getting much clearer about what bullying is, and also clear about what our well thought out, efficient response to that is. And at a leadership level, our leaders in our partner schools are telling us that they're less overwhelmed, that they're actually a lot more proactive in their work. They're telling us that in their school, blame habits have been reduced. So that it's kind of manifesting in a lot of schools as at the moment, because the challenges are so diverse in terms of engaging and dealing with the needs of so many disaffected in a lot of ways young people, that the response knee-jerk to seeing a new challenge is sometimes to blame. Oh, it's because of that kid's family, it's because of the kid he was sitting next to, it's because of him, it's because leadership aren't supporting me as well. And that what we're finding now is that schools are taking a far greater problem-solving mindset. And so they're able to say, actually, we've got a problem here. Let's take our explicit practice framework and use it as a lens to view the challenge that's in front of us. And let's use the staff room time we've got together to come up with a hypothesis that might make things a little better. And they're also telling us that this punitive mindset. Now, I've bought the Kool-Aid on the idea that I think all of us have a little punitive teacher hiding inside our souls, and mine screams occasionally and wants to come out. So I think punitive mindsets don't ever go away completely. But what we're finding in our schools is that it's not the default, and that the voice of that screaming punitive teacher isn't the one that we listen to all the time. The teachers can actually be assisted to get really clear about where punishments and consequences fit in a restorative model. I'll talk about that in just a moment. We just need to give them the resource and the ability and the trust to understand it more effectively. Many schools that we meet are telling us that I do an exercise sometimes when I ask people to just on their hands show me how many of these are a challenge for you. And most schools, and a lot of school leaders will make the joke, I need to take my shoes off to get that done. But even if there's just 2 or 3 in there, we would contend to you that the recipe for improving that sometimes makes it, the recipe for improving that is not to chase each individual challenge separately. So this is, I don't know, sometimes I feel a bit naff presenting this, if you can hang in there with me. But it's actually critically important that this concept lands with you, is that we think that running up the tree and polishing these apples separately, we think that running up the tree and trying to improve student learning outcomes in literacy and then coming back down the tree, and now let's do bullying and come back down the tree. Now let's try and get parents on side and come back down the tree. And let's run up the tree again and try to remove this punitive mindset that's getting in the way, and let's come back down the tree. And I mean, even just saying it out loud to me sometimes sounds like a recipe for exhaustion, particularly for leadership exhaustion. And our contention is that what we need to, our premise, is that when you get the culture right, that you grow healthier apples. When you get the culture right, that all those problems become smaller. When you get the culture right, everything gets better. And so our intention in working with you is to kind of go, stop for a second, just woo for a moment, and let's actually get beneath the surface. Let's talk about what's really going on in your school. Let's talk about what are the practices, what are the mindsets that are leading us astray and are making us grow unhealthy apples, and what's our sphere of influence to do something more productive about that. And for our schools who have made that decision to work on the culture of their school, so I guess today, if you were to take nothing away from this webinar, other than this sentence, it would be to let you know that I think that it's time for you to embrace the idea of school culture being the most important thing you do. And when schools and their leaders make that decision that actually leading the culture of the school is the most important thing I do, and when they say that as a result, we're going to make the decision to walk this path with real schools in partnership, what they're getting on the other side of not only solving and meeting challenges is some incredibly positive impacts. And so our partner schools are telling us that these are kind of the top 10. That these are the things that they're getting. Their teachers are more consistent in their work and are able to speak to the things to the practices that they're consistent about. Their capacity is improved. So they're telling us that they're getting less of the handball effect in their schools, which happens for 2 reasons. One is that teachers feel they can't handle certain situations, and 2 is because as leaders, we keep taking the handball. So there are 2 practices to kind of deal with there, and we're helping schools do that. The relational data we're getting, both from a school climate and a social outcomes point of view, is improved. That parent support for what the school's looking the way that the school's looking to work is enhanced, and that our strategic objectives, our schools are finding that their strategic objectives are being met, even though they haven't specifically labelled them within our partnership parameters. So one school who had a key target around engagement found that their student behaviour reports dropped, but they also met the target around engagement. So there's some really fabulous things that are starting to happen here, particularly, we working with so many schools, we get access to a lot of review documentation that happens in schools. And I would say that the most common review recommendation that we get back is to focus on that dot point there about student engagement, agency and voice. Now, one of the default reactions that we're seeing in our schools a lot is things like, okay, we need to listen to the students more. We'll ramp up the Student Leadership Council, which means roughly we're going to listen to 10 of them. And for me, student voice, student agency expended outside something worthwhile, not walking around the school organising fundraisers, but actually in pursuit of their own learning and their own social growth is the way to go if you want to improve those markers. And our schools are telling us that their student engagement, student agency, student voice markers are improving dramatically, and that they're getting that improvement not by formally listening to a few or running another program, but by changes that can be taken to scale in the classroom. And I think that's incredibly exciting. And for any leader that's sitting here going, actually, if leading culture is going to get me these outcomes, then I'm ready to embrace that decision. Then I think that you're in the right place at the right time. So the first thing you need to know if you're going to make this decision to step forward with us in partnership is what are we implementing? And so what we're implementing together is a restorative practices inspired framework that I've been developing now for, I think, in the vicinity of 15 years or so. I call it RP 2.0. So RP 2.0 is a taking of the principles of working restoratively and applying them in a more sophisticated and more generous way to the context of a proper, real Australian school. You don't have time to use some of the artifacts every single day that have been advocated in old, what I would call RP 1.0, restorative practices or restorative justice methodologies of running long conferences and carrying around question cards all of the time. Your work is actually intuitively far more informal. And what we did was, or what I did was go and have a look at what are the key drivers of culture. And I tried for a while to kind of leave even school cultures out of it, but just to learn about culture. And I looked at national, looked at community, looked at family, looked at street cultures, which were really interesting to go and have a look at. And the three artifacts that just kept coming back were the things that drive culture. Language, first of all. And I spoke to a group of teachers yesterday about this, about how I think that for a lot of teachers at this time of the year in February, that what they're doing is looking at their class and they've already spotted who are the kids that they're going to have to kind of expend the most energy on. And one of the things I've often thought is, you know what, if I could spend an hour as a fly on the wall in that kid's house, I'd probably learn a lot about them, that would be valuable learning. And I often put to those teachers, what I think you would pay attention to is what are the words being spoken and how are they being spoken. So you pay attention to language. And language is undoubtedly not only an input, but an output of culture. And we show teachers 4 ways to impact their language. Talk to them about affective language. We talk to them about stored responses. Both of those leverage some really clever research, some social psychology around the interplay between the neocortex and the limbic system in the brain, which is work that people like Professor Nathan Wallace in New Zealand have been developing for a long time now, that is proving to be foundational, wise, and incredibly difficult to ignore. We're talking about positive priming. We talk also about stakeholder protection to ensure a psychologically safe environment. All of these strategies can be achieved in a matter of a few seconds. And all we need to do is take them to habit and scale in our school and teach teachers these strategies and give them lots of fun and informal support to get really good at them. From a conduct perspective, and I did, when I first designed RP 2.0, I did call this domain practice, but I think that practice invokes an image of a teacher at the front of the classroom, and that's not what I wanted to invoke. I think that, in fact, a lot of the interactions between educators and all of the staff in your school and your students don't necessarily happen in that environment. There's a multitude of other times and places and ways that we interact. And so we show people how to run effective interactions, which is the chat. If ever your teacher radar pings and says, that's worth a chat. What we'd like is for every adult in your school to conduct that chat consistently and quickly, and for that chat to finish with a young person being thanked and congratulated for personal responsibility. So it's really cool to be able to kind of tell teachers that whenever it's worth a chat, you've only got 2 jobs. Conduct a fast and fair conversation. Thank and congratulate the kid when it ends up with them taking personal responsibility. And it simplifies for teachers what they need to do when young people produce completely expectable errors in the way that they're contributing to your culture. We show them how to handle conflict resolution using a methodology called P3, P3, F3. So that's for when conflict goes to scale when there's a group. And I don't know about you, but my joke is always that I think that we've all launched at some stage a 1 hour episode of Education CSI after a lunchtime scrap, and I think that needs to stop. And so we show teachers how, through choosing a past, present, future methodology, they can spend 3 minutes on the past, 3 minutes on the present, 3 minutes on the future, and get the kids out of there and get back to the art of school leadership really quickly. But also in a way that shows the students how to do it. And that's where the deployment of these effective interactions and the P3, P3, F3 methodology change the game. So when young people learn over a period of time that the school's game is not to try and get you into trouble when something goes wrong, thereby the way they need to play that game is to lie, obfuscate, admit information, exaggerate, try to get someone else to take the blame. And a lot of teachers are telling me that the kids who have a propensity to lie are getting better at it because they're learning the rules of the game more effectively. But what we find is when we change the game through effective interactions and conflict resolution, methods like P3, P3, F3, young people start to self-report as perpetrators. And that's game changing. And so people often ask me, how do you know if a school is a restorative school? Well, I think what I would say is that when they start to self-report as perpetrators, you're onto something. And our schools are telling us that that's happening right from our primary schools all the way through to our senior secondary schools that we're working with. And then the third piece there is around circle architecture, how we can use circles to foster a higher level of engagement in the classroom. One of our fabulous teachers talks about how she sees that her ambition, this is something that came up for her post-COVID, her ambition is for every class to feel like a group project. And circle architecture done through 5 different circle types in a variety of really nimble ways is making teaching life easier for a lot of our teachers. Now, some people are sitting here going, oh boy, we've got to, I don't know if we can do like circles because we've got some work we need to do around direct or explicit instruction at the moment. We're in that space. And I can tell you now, there's nothing that's not direct or explicit about the instruction that occurs in the learning circle. And in fact, we've got 2 expert facilitators at real schools, former principals in 2 different sectors, in Trish Quaylo and Brenda Quayle, who have sat down and developed a brilliant white paper that we're providing to all of our partner schools at the moment about how to tackle direct and explicit instruction in a restorative school. And there's further resource coming in that space too, which is exciting. And from a conduct perspective, we show schools how to get the punishment and consequences piece done right. There's a simple PDF, makes it really clear. No, it's not a chart with levels and places, and it's not a flow chart that you have to follow, that you have to drop a kid into because behaviour is too variable for that. There are 3 principles, and we help schools implement that in their work. And then it's about tackling mindset. How do we get beyond any adversarial mindset that might be pervading? How do we get people to understand the great behaviour, the great emotion or affect that drives self-regulation in young people? Shame. How do we treat shame as a noun in our schools, something that occurs when we fall short or feel that we've fallen short? And how do we train young people and the educators to respond to that positively? Because that's going to happen in a school. How can we do that better than if we treat shame like a verb, where people get shamed when they fall short or feel like they've fallen short in the school? We show teachers how to be truly authoritative in their work. Your teachers will feel in a restorative school that they are running the show. And that's a really fabulous feeling for them, particularly when they do it through their practice and not their power. And we'll also show them how they can let go of outcomes. How they can kind of say, actually, my job is not to guarantee an outcome. My job is not to chase an outcome until I'm exhausted. My job is to do this. Good practice, deploy it every single day, and to kind of let go of judging themselves by outcomes alone, and say that we've got collective responsibility for wonderful practice in our school and not for guaranteeing that every outcome is going to be exactly as we wish it to be. In fact, some outcomes might even end up a lot better if we just trust that teachers, given support, can deploy some really fabulous practice. That's what we'd be up to. Now, I've put that together in a book, and by your registration in the webinar today, that book called Restoring Teaching, we're just releasing right now its 2nd edition. I've been really excited to pull that together. And so we're going to be sending you that book. So exciting times. And it's also available on, if you're going to have a look on the Real Schools website. I think someone in my team might be going to share the link in the chat at about this point. If you go there and have a look, you can also get it, access it as an audio book. I'm someone who's gotten right into accessing or books in the car while I'm driving. And within the next week or so, it's also going to be available as an ebook. So if you're a Kindle reader, then you'll be able to access that from there as well. But we want you to know, hard copy coming your way so that you can understand more about that. And then how do we get it done? Now, I don't expect you to be able to read everything that's on this slide, but I'll give you a rough overview first up. Okay, so first up is that we want your people to learn that framework and to get really good at it in the context of your school. That's it. We do it by providing professional learning, and depending on the level of partnership that you think your school is best to access, that'll either be through online curriculum. So we're developing right now a wonderful online curriculum that's launching just next term, where, like Netflix, your three times a term, a new episode around working restoratively will land in your school across the next 3 years. So 36 different modules about practicing restoratively that are delivered directly by me, and that will provide in between course architecture that helps people get started and to use all of the learnings that they experience in the sets of videos that land for them. But we also provide the professional learning on professional learning days in schools with our expert facilitators. Now, this is why this is kind of in yellow at the top of this slide here, because I think it's the most important piece. No matter the level of partnership that you access, you'll be allocated an expert facilitator from our team who has been not only a former and successful teacher, but a former and successful principal. These people are credible, they're authentic, they're funny, and they're available. So they hand over the mobile phone number and the email address, and we want to know if there's something going on in your school that's worth either leaning harder into or that is worth celebrating. So we'll provide that professional learning one way or another. In a couple of our partnership options, there's the option for us to show up in the school and implement in the classroom with the teachers, modelling, co-teaching, providing feedback, also to engage directly with your parents. And also there's some leadership mentoring and coaching that's available in partnership work along the way as well, that'll help you to be able to develop action plans and what we call a student engagement plan, which is kind of a front-facing, a public-facing document in your school's colours and logo that will be a declaration to the community of this is what you can expect from us. The resourcing piece is enormous. And our partner portal that every single staff member will have access to is something that they'll all get the login deets for, and that's ACE. And it's so simple. They go in there and there's a search bar. They can put in there the area that they want some help with. So it could be student engagement, and every resource we've got, every professional reading, every classroom resource, every video we have available drops out for them. And we think that gives them point of need help. I actually spoke to a principal last year who said he walked into the staff room and there were 4 teachers huddled around a phone. And he did say that the skeptic in him thought that they might have been watching a horse race, but they weren't. They were actually watching a video, Poor Things of My Head, suggesting a new strategy for a particular challenge they had that they were all getting ready to try in the next lesson. And that's exactly how we want it used. And so that's really exciting. And the ancillary resources available in there are just off the charts of what's available, all the way through to a student leadership program and an innovative approach to individual behaviour planning as well. And we third bias is for measurement. We have several tools that we're using to help with all the way through from being able to identify project points in your school to identify baseline and then post-work data points. We have tools that can help you with things like classroom walkthroughs and to facilitate professional learning communities in your school. And it's important to us that you get the chance to celebrate the milestones that your school passes. And so everything you can see on the screen here is kind of a 1 year, piece of what it feels like and looks like to be in partnership. And that gets replicated across each of the 3 years that you would work with us. And then it gets to this kind of important piece about what's what are these tiers? What are these 4 new ways of partnering that we could consider for our school? And so the first is kind of the entry level point, is the Bronze Partnership. So in the Bronze Partnership, we provide the professional learning through the online curriculum. And you, yes, are still very much accessed to an expert facilitator who is yours for the 3-year journey. And they do, like in any other partnership, hand over the phone and mobile phone number and the email address. And they really want to know. Yeah, and this level of partnership has been developed with a handful of different kind of avatar schools in mind. Schools who are remote, schools who are small, schools who are super keen but haven't kind of planned or budgeted for this and want an entry point that they can access and they can get started with. So your expert facilitator support while you get started is an online experience. So we don't actually jump on the plane and fly out to your school in a Bronze Partnership, but the online experience is amazing these days. And it includes things like our student behaviour PhD. So this is a new program that we're actually launching in March. Myself and Kirsty Lush, one of our expert facilitators, who's an absolute guru in the student behaviour space, are providing an ancillary program that focuses specifically on helping teachers where student behaviour is a challenge for them. 8 modules that drop across the year, again, a bit like Netflix, with a whole heap of course architecture that helps them and supports them to get going in a number of different areas. And that's something that that's available to teachers right across Australia, and we're a little, we're perhaps in a fraction overwhelmed at the interest in the program at the moment, but we're providing it free within partnership. So schools outside of partnership can get people enrolled at $350 a person for the program, but schools inside partnership can enroll as many people as they like from inside on their staff for absolutely nothing. And that's proving to be of incredible benefit and value to those schools. If I push you forward now to the Silver Partnership, this is where you get everything that's in Bronze. Okay, but you also get an expert facilitator who jumps on a plane if they need to, or jumps in the car and shows up at your school. And what they show up for is what I mentioned before, the in-class support day. So they come and get on the floor or stand in front of your young people and show your teachers how they can use all the practices we used within context, which is really cool. And they will run the parent information session in your school as well. And some of that leadership and coaching time can sometimes be kind of tacked on while we're there, and that makes it really beneficial as well. We find that this is great for one of the things that we'll ask of your school is to nominate a champion, and that to have a champion like an assistant principal or maybe sometimes a wellbeing coordinator who's got a really thick and strong relationship with your expert facilitator, that can be facilitated really well through a Silver Partnership, even if your school's not a super large school. The next one is kind of our tried and true, our trusty old friend, our Gold Partnership. And this is the partnership model that we've been running in our schools I've been running since I first left my principalship about 12 years ago now, and it's produced some amazing results. And this is where the expert facilitator kind of comes into your school and becomes your best friend. Becomes that true extension of your leadership team. They share in the responsibility for this working in your school. And so you get everything in Silver, but what they do is they provide the professional learning in person in your school. They'll sit down with you and have a chat with you about when's the next opportunity to get that done. Sometimes it can be that we've got to negotiate that a bit. So it might be that you've got a day and we can allocate it to it. And it might be that you don't have one in the next 12 months, but you really want a Gold level partnership. And so we'll talk about how we might be able to do it in some after school sessions or something to get it going. And we often say what we often do is side eye you. And we'll say, but let's talk year 2 really quickly. And let's see what we can do to make sure that the experience is far more an in-person opportunity. We still believe that we can make an enormous difference through the Gold level partnership, and it's probably targeted at the biggest band of schools that we can think of as those schools that kind of are our mainstream schools in either metro or regional areas that have a population big enough that we actually want that relationship to guarantee that we're going to get the difference and get the outcomes that we're looking for. And then the third new type of partnership, our 4th tier, is our Platinum Partnerships. One of the things that we discovered was that the Gold level partnership was doing a terrific job for that big, thick band of schools in the middle. But when it came to large multi-campus schools, that they weren't quite getting the service that they needed from us to get the outcomes that they were looking for. So there's additional coaching and leadership mentoring that occurs through the Platinum Partnership. And we also put in an additional in-class support day. If your school has 70 classes, then we probably can't get to enough of them on the in-class day to have the impact that you're looking for. We'll do another one of those at the Platinum level. And so it's worth giving some thought to what level your school is going to be best suited to as we start to think a little bit about getting together and having a chat. You wouldn't be a school leader if you weren't having a little thought in here about budget. So I might as well declare it. So what you can see on this table here is what the investment is to make in your school to get the challenges that you identified at the start of the webinar today met, and to have the outcomes, the positives that you also saw in our partner schools top 10 achieved. We think that to achieve all of that the price point here per year at each of the different partnership levels is good value, particularly to do it in the company of someone who's done it in their own schools. And so you can see the bronze level partnership is $9,950 per year across the 3 years. Yes, we invoice annually, not upfront. We're a tribe of former principals. We know how your budgets work. It's okay. We'll stick with you on that. And yes, what you can do if you're sitting here thinking now, okay, oh, gee, I really want to do this, but we haven't budgeted for it. Let's get in at the bronze level with a view that we want to scale up to silver or gold in the year after. Yes, we'll have those conversations about how you can get that done as you go. The silver level, as I mentioned, where you get the expert facilitator coming to run the in-class support day and the parent session in person, is at $15,750 per year. The gold level, tried and true, that's $21,500 per year, and the platinum level is $29,500 per year. And so this webinar today is an invitation to have a little chat about that for your school. So a couple of ways that we want to make that super easy for it to happen. Number one is that if you're sitting here now going, all right, I'll sit down and have a yarn with you about our school, just go to the chat box and put the word convo in there. And what will happen after that, or either way, actually, if you do go to the chat box, you can put the word convo there, we'll take care of it. The other thing, what we'll do is go and write you, we'll go and book a meeting time. We find that that's more effective than kind of going backwards and forwards, trying to negotiate the perfect meeting time. But if you're sitting here now going, actually, I wouldn't mind being able to book my own time. I know roughly when is the best time for us. Layla has put in the chat box our book a meeting link. You can go straight to that link and you can pick a time immediately where myself or one of our other school culture experts in the team will be available, and you just nominate the time and we'll find that's available and that works best for you. And we'll find a way to make sure that somebody sits down with you and works you through it and learns a little bit about your school and what are the challenges and what are the ambitions and what are the things that you're proud of about your school as we move forward as well. We also, of course, have people today who might be watching this later. And so what we'll do for anybody who sort of doesn't give us a response here or what they're looking for is book you in a time. And when you get that time not sent to you by email, which doesn't make a lot of sense for me now because if you're watching this video later, you've already got the email, but you'll see that you're able to change that. So there'll be a link there for you to be able to step in and go, okay, thanks for that time, but this one would work better. And so it'll work out for you. And I think that kind of leaves me at the end. All right. So for me, it's really important that you know that restorative future that you've got in mind for your school is attainable now. It's important for me that you know that the path to that restorative future now is clear and that it is definitely easier. And it's really important that you know that we don't need to trade off well-being against student learning to get the outcomes that we're looking for as school leaders. And as I also mentioned, I think it's the most important thing that you make the decision right now that leading the culture of your school is the most important thing that you can do. And if you do that, I think that your time today has been well spent. All right, I'm going to leave it there, folks. Thank you so much for coming along. I'll do the whole kind of just let the webinar slide out slowly as I watch the attendee list to see if people leave. But also, it'll give you an opportunity if you'd like to make a comment or you'd like to give me some feedback even. I'm really open to that, always trying to do these things better and better. But more than anything, I was really hope we get the chance to work with you in the future. So we'll give you every opportunity to have a chat and tell us about your school moving forward. Isn't Zoom amazing? Hey, I can see these like little thumbs coming up on the screen and little love hearts and things like that. It's so cool that we can do those little things these days. So thanks, folks. Appreciate your time this afternoon and appreciate everything you're doing in schools. And we'll be in touch and we'll talk to you very soon.